Welcome back and welcome to part 2 of this Blender tutorial series where we're creating this lighthouse 3D scene. So if you haven't watched part 1 where we modeled the tower of the lighthouse, then definitely check that out with the link in the description. And in this part we are going to finish the modeling by modeling the house which is connecting to the lighthouse. And if you're enjoying this tutorial series and you'd like to help support me and this channel, you can purchase the finished project files of this tutorial on my Gumroad store and also my Patreon page. I'll have the links in the description. And some great ways to support the channel here on YouTube is by checking out the YouTube memberships by clicking down there on that join button next to the subscribe button. And you can also use the super thanks feature here on YouTube to send me a little tip if you're enjoying this tutorial series. So let's start by modeling the house. So I'll press Shift C to center the 3D cursor into the center of the scene, and I'll press Shift A, we'll go to mesh, and I'm going to add a cube. And I'm going to bring it right over here on the side, so I'll hit G to grab, bring it over on the Y-axis right there. And then I'll hit the Tab key to go into edit mode, and I want to scale this up and also bring it up on the Z-axis. And then I can also scale it on the Y-axis and we'll make it a bit longer. And if I press 3 on the numpad, that'll go to side view, and I want to scale it on the Y-axis. And I'll first scale it so that the cube is going all the way inside the lighthouse. If I hold down the Z button and go into wireframe, I want to scale it on the Y-axis so that it's about in the center there of that lighthouse. So right about like that. And I will zoom out a bit. And then I'll deselect everything and I'll just box select this side, and I want to bring this side back, so hit G to grab, bring it back on the Y-axis, and I want to bring it back to about here so that it's a little over the second grid. So if you zoom out, you can see there's the center, there is the first grid, so it's that far, and then there is the second grid. So I want to bring it out to about there, so it's just a little bit farther into the second grid. Then I'll box select the top here and I'll bring it up, and I'll bring it up on the Z-axis, and we'll bring it up to about there, so it's about 1 grid high. So I now will press the 7 on the numpad to go to top view. I'll hold down the Z button and go into wireframe and just press the A key to make sure you select everything. And I'll now scale it to make it wider, so I'll scale it on the X-axis. We'll make it a bit wider. So if I go back to solid view and kind of navigate over here, I can hit S to scale and then X again, and you can see that is going to be way too thin, but if I bring it way up too far, you can start to see through it. So it's coming out of the lighthouse. So I want to bring it down so it's just about that far, so that the house is going into the lighthouse. And then just one other thing I want to do, I want to go to the face select and just select this face, and I want to bring it down a little bit on the Z-axis so it's a bit lower, because we are going to be having that roof, and the roof will come up about here. So I'll bring it down a little bit farther so that we have room for that roof there. So now let's model that roof. So we have the top face still selected, so I'll hit E to extrude, we'll bring that up on the Z-axis, and then I can scale it on the X-axis and we'll make it very small, so scale that way down, so there should just be a small face on the top there, so something like that. If I go right up here, this detail, I want to bring it up a little bit, so I'm going to go back to object mode, and I'll just select the tower and go into edit mode, and just make sure everything is deselected, and then you can press the L key with your mouse hovered over that loop there to select the linked vertices, and I just want to bring it up a bit on the Z-axis, so I'll bring it up to about there and scale it down a little bit because it was just a little bit too low. So I can go back to object mode, and that is looking much better. Let's select the house again and go into edit mode, and I want to bring the roof down just a little bit. And then I'm actually going to deselect everything, and I'll just box select this front part here, and I'm going to bring it out just a little bit farther on the Y-axis so it's a little bit longer. Alright, so the next thing that I want to do is create some windows right here in the house. So I'll press Ctrl R to add a loop cut. I'm going to left click here and then drag up, and then click again to place it about there. That's going to be the top of the window. Control R again to add another one, and then click, and this one's going to be right about there, so place it there. So that's the bottom of the windows and the top of the windows. Let's press Control R to add another loop cut, and we will bring this loop cut kind of into the center, right about there. And then we can add some more windows here. So I'll press Ctrl R to add a loop cut. This time I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel until there are 2 loops, and then I can left click and right click just so that it stays in the center. And then I want the windows to be thinner, so I will scale them down. Let's scale it on the Y-axis, and I'll make that a bit thinner. And then I want to do the same thing over here. So Control R to add a loop cut. Let's make 2 of them. So scroll your mouse wheel to have 2 of them, left click and then right click, and then I can scale them both down on the Y-axis, and we'll make that about the same size. And I can also hit G to grab. Let's bring this over on the Y-axis, and we'll bring that over so it's more kind of in that center part. Alright, so now within these windows, I want to add 3 more loop cuts. So I'll press Ctrl R, scroll my mouse wheel until there are 3, and then left click and right click to place it there, and then Ctrl R, scroll my mouse wheel until there are 3, and then left click and right click. And we're going to be using this to make the top of the windows kind of be rotating up, just to make it look a little bit more fancy. So I'll deselect everything, I'll hold down the Z button and go to wireframe, and I'll click and drag to box select those 3 vertices which are in the center window area, and then press B for the box select and select those 3 which are in the center window area. So I'll hit G to grab, I'll bring it up on the Z axis so they're a little bit taller, and then click there, and then deselect everything. Let's hit B for the box select, put one there, and then B for the box select and add one there. And then G to grab, and we'll bring it up on the Z axis just a little bit so that the top of the windows are kind of rounding over. So if I go back to solid view, you can see what we've made. And because I did this in wireframe view, if I go over to the other side of the lighthouse, the back here, you can see it's done the same thing because I did it in wireframe, so it selected the back vertices. So I can now just delete these faces. So I'll go here to the face select. I'm going to click and drag to box select these, and then hold down the shift key, and we're just going to select those 4. And before I delete them, I want to extrude them back. So I'll hit E to extrude. We'll bring that back to about there, and then I can hit X to delete, and let's just delete the faces. So now we have some holes for the windows. Alright, let's go back to object mode, and then with this object selected, we can click on add modifier here on the modifier properties, and I want to add a bevel modifier. So add modifier, let's add a bevel, and I can zoom in here, and I want to make this bigger, and let's turn the segments up to like 4, and then I can also hold down the shift key and drag the amount here, and I just want to make it very, very small, so it's a very small bevel, and then using the object context menu, let's shade that smooth. So now the edges have a little bit of rounding. So we're now going to be modeling the window frames. So I'll go back to object mode, I'll press Shift A, we'll add a new object here, we're going to add another cube, and let's bring the cube up, and we're going to bring the cube right over here. We're going to stick the cube in the window, and let's scale it down a bit. And then I'll press Ctrl A and just apply the scale again since we scaled that down. And then I'll also bring it down on the Z axis, we'll stick it there, and then I can go into edit mode, and we're going to scale it down on the Z axis. We'll just scale it like that and kind of move it over, maybe bring it out a little bit more. So we kind of have like a wooden lip piece, which is kind of coming out here, kind of around the window frame. And then I can select this face here and we'll bring it up on the Z axis. We'll bring it there. And then this face here, we can bring it down on the Z axis and just stick it right there. Maybe bring that out a little bit more. All right, so I now want to add a loop cut. So I'll press Ctrl R, click, and then we'll drag this over to kind of in the center there and click to place that there. And then I want to add some more loop cuts here so that we can extrude up the window frames. So I'll press Ctrl R, and I can scroll my mouse wheel so that there are 2 of them, and then left click and right click. And then I can scale these, and we'll scale them out on the Y axis, and we'll scale that about that far. Then I can go here to the face select, and we will select this face, and hold down the shift key and select this face. And I want to zoom out here, and I will hit E to extrude. Let's bring this way up here. We'll bring it up to about there, and then I can hit E to extrude again, and we'll extrude that up there. So I now want to fill this face and this face. So I'm first going to just hold down the shift key and select both of those faces, and I will press E to extrude, then I will hit S to scale, and then I'll scale them in on the Y axis. And then we want to scale them together, so I will type 0 and then enter. So we're basically squishing them together on the Y axis. Now we need to merge these, and we also have extra faces in here. So let's hit X to delete, and then I want to delete those faces. Now we're going to have overlapping vertices right here. If I go to the vertex select and select a vertex and move it out, you can see there's overlapping vertices. So press the A key to select the entire mesh, and we're going to hit the M key to merge, and we're going to merge by distance. So you can see right down there it says removed 4 vertices. Those were those vertices there. So now they are connected. So I'm now going to go back here to the face select, and I'll just select this face. I'll press Shift D to duplicate it, and I'll bring it about into the center, but I'm going to bring it a little over to one side. And then I want to scale the entire thing up on the Z axis, so it's a bit bigger. And then we're going to scale everything down a bit on the X axis so it's not quite as thick, just like that. So I can kind of zoom in here, bring that over a bit, and then I'll hit E to extrude. We'll just bring that out there. All right, and that's going to be like the center part of the window frame. And then I want to have some side pieces, some side wooden pieces, and there's going to be 3 of those. So I'm going to press the L key with my mouse hovered over this object here. I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and then immediately after that I will rotate it. So hit R to rotate. We'll rotate it on the x-axis, and then to rotate it over exactly by 90, we can type in 9, 0, and then enter. And I now want to scale it down because it's a bit too long, so I'll scale it down on the y-axis. We'll make that just a bit smaller like that, and then we can scale the entire thing up a little bit so it's a bit more thick. So this one should be in the center, and I actually want to scale it up on the z-axis so it's a little bit thicker, and then I want to have one right here and another one down here. So I'm going to bring this one up a little bit more to about there. I can press Shift D to duplicate, bring it up on the z-axis and put one there, and then Shift D to duplicate, bring it down on the z-axis and put another one there. And then also I think these are coming out just a little bit too far, so I'm going to select these three faces here, and I want to bring them back on the y-axis, just so they're not coming out quite as far. Alright, go back to object mode, and there we go, we have the window frame. Now I do want to add a bevel to this object, and I also need to flip the normals because you can see the shading looks a bit off. So I'll go into edit mode, I'll select everything, and then I can press Shift N, that will recalculate the normals, and now the shading looks much better. So now let's add a bevel, so I'll click here on add modifier. We can add the bevel modifier under generate, and if I zoom way in to see it better, I want to turn the segments up to like a 4, and then this amount here, I can hold down the Shift key and drag the amount to make it more subtle, to make my movements less sensitive, and I want to make that a very small number, so like a 0.004, and then we can also shade this object smooth with the object context menu. And then I also want this window frame to be over here as well, so I'll press Shift D to duplicate it, click and drag with my mouse wheel, bring it right over there. Now if we go right over here to the other side of the house, you can see that it hasn't mirrored it over because we actually did never mirror this. So I'm just going to delete half of it and then mirror it. So I'll press Ctrl R to add a loop cut right up here, and I can left click and right click so it stays in the center. And then I'll go to front view, I'll hold down the Z button and go to wireframe, and I want to go here to the vertex select. And I'll deselect everything, and then just click and drag, and we just want to box select all these vertices which are over here on this side, and we can hit X to delete, and let's delete the vertices. So if I go back to solid view, you can see half of it's deleted. So let's click on add modifier, and under generate we can add the mirror modifier, and right here on the axis I do want this to be the x-axis. Let's also turn the clipping on so that it merges in the very center. And then also it is better if the mirror modifier is before the bevel so that it adds the mirror modifier first. So let's click here on these dots and we can drag the mirror up and then let go. So now the mirror is before the bevel. And then I also want to have the window frames on the other side, so we can add a mirror modifier to them as well. So let's click here on this window frame, we can click on add modifier, and we can add the mirror modifier. Now it's mirroring it in the very center of the object, which is that origin there, but I instead want it to be mirroring from the center of the house. So if we go down here to the mirror, you can see there is the mirror object. We can click on the eyedropper and then we can just choose that cube. So now this is the center part of the mirror, so you can see the window frame is now over there on the other side. And then we could just mirror it over with this object as well, but I'm just going to select this object. I'll hit X and delete it. We can click on this object, Shift D to duplicate it, and just bring it over because we've already added the mirror onto it. So just stick it right there. Alright, so now we have both windows on the sides of the house. So I now want to make the glass for the windows. So again, I'll press Shift C just to make sure the 3D cursor there is in the very center of the scene. So I can press Shift A, and I'm going to add a plane, and let's bring the plane over, and I'll hit Tab to go into edit mode. And if I go into wireframe, I want to bring the plane up here, bring it over, and why I'm bringing it over in edit mode is just so that we can add a mirror modifier and it will mirror it over to this side because the object's origin is in the very center. So I'll go back to solid view and I can now rotate this. Let's rotate it on the y-axis. I'll type in 90 and then enter so that it's rotated over. Let's just scale it down just to the size that we need, and we can bring it right over here. So I want it to be right here in the center between that wood piece. So we can now bring it up on the z-axis into the center, and then we can scale this up on the z-axis to fill the window. And then let's bring it forward just a little bit as well. So I can now go back to object mode, and then let's also add the mirror modifier. So I'll click on add modifier, and under generate, we can add the mirror modifier here in the center under generate. And because the object's origin was right there in the center, it's now mirroring it to the other side. And then I want to press Shift D to duplicate. You can click and hold with your mouse wheel to constrain it to the y-axis, and stick one right over there. So now we have the completed windows with the glass and the frames. Alright, so we're now going to be modeling the roof. So we'll select this object again and go into edit mode, and I want to select all of the faces on top of the roof here. So I'm going to click here for the face select, and I can click and drag just to box select all these pieces, and then just hold down the shift key and you can select these other pieces, or you can hit the B for the box select and just box select those pieces there. And I'll just go into wireframe to make sure I have those all selected. Alright, so I'll now press Shift D to duplicate, bring it up on the Z axis, and then I'll hit P, and we're going to separate by selection so that selection is its own object. So I can go back to object mode, select this piece here, and we can go into edit mode. So I'll now press the 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I'll zoom in here and I'll scale the whole thing up a bit, but I want to bring it back first because I don't want that center part to be merged. I want to bring it back a bit. So basically what I want is just a little bit of a lip there so that the rain can fall off and it'll actually go into the gutters. So I will now press G to grab and I'll bring that in. I'm actually going to go to wireframe and I'm going to bring it here like inside the house. So you can see there is the front of the house or the top of the house, and then there is the roof. So I'll now hit E to extrude, and we're going to bring this out and we're going to make it thicker so that it is covering the top of the house. And it'll just make it kind of about that thick. So I'll go back to solid view and you can see what we've made. So now we have kind of that thick roof there. And I want to select everything and I want to bring the roof back. So I'll hit G to grab, bring it back on the Y axis and just bring that back in a little bit. So that is really good. Now I want to have a thick wood siding piece, which is kind of right up here. So there's going to be a big piece of wood, which is going to be this shape, and it's going to come all the way down. So I'm going to select this face here, hold down the shift key, select this face, and I can duplicate them, and I'll bring them out on the Y axis like that. And then I want to make it a bit larger, so I'll press 1 for front view, I'll hit G to grab and bring it a little bit away from the mirror, and then I can scale it up, and I'll bring it away from the mirror and kind of scale it up so it's a bit thicker. So now if I go into wireframe, you can see there is a bit of thickness there. So there is the roof and there's going to be that wood siding piece. So it's just a bit longer. Maybe bring that up to about there. Something like that's pretty good. Now if I go over here, you can see it's way too long. So to fix this, I'm going to go to the vertex select. I'll deselect everything. I'll click and drag to box select these vertices, and I'll double tap the G key. So double tapping the G key will activate the edge slide, and I will just stick that right about there. Alright, so then I want to just hover my mouse over this vertex and press the L key to select the link's vertices, and I'll go back to solid view. So I want to bring this out a little bit, so it's kind of to about there, and then I want to extrude it out to give it some thickness, so I'll hit E to extrude, and extrude that out there. So now we have that big wooden piece there on the edge. And I need to select everything and press Shift N to recalculate the normals. Now I also want to have another wood piece, which is right here, and it's going back. So what I'm going to do is press Shift A, and I'm doing this in edit mode, and I'm going to add a plane, so now it's in the same object. I'll hit G to grab, move the plane up here, and I can move the plane back, and you can see if the plane is connecting to the mirror like this, you can just turn this clipping button off, you can bring the plane over, and then turn the clipping back on. So I can now scale the plane down and stick it right in here, and I'll press the period on the numpad to zoom into it. And I want to scale it down a bit, scale it down like that and over, and then I can also rotate it. We'll rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees, and I actually want it to be longer, so let's scale it up on the z-axis, and then we'll scale it down on the x-axis. And I'll just kind of stick it right in there, kind of scale it down and kind of put it up right there, so it's kind of going into that other piece of wood, and we'll bring it out a little bit like that. So I'll now hit E to extrude, and let's extrude this way out, and we're going to bring this way over, and it's going to go all the way into the lighthouse. And then I want to select this face right here on the side, and I want to make it a bit thinner, so I'll bring it back on the x-axis, and this face here I could bring it out a little bit, so it's just a little bit thinner, so something like that. So now there is this little spot right here where we can add the gutter. So the gutter is going to start here, and it's going to go down and then come up, so we're going to have that little space there to add the gutter. We also need to recalculate the normals again. You can see the shading is a bit off on this object, so select everything and press Shift N to recalculate the normals. So to make the gutter, I can actually just select this face here. I'll press Shift D to duplicate it, bring it over, and then I do want the gutter to be its own object, so I'll press the P key, and let's separate by selection. So I can go back to object mode, select this object, and we can go into edit mode, and I'll select this object and let's scale it down on the Z-axis a bit, and I can bring it over here, and we're just going to stick the gutter right there. And then if I press 1 on the numpad to go to front view, I can go into wireframe and I actually want to rotate the gutter over. So I'll rotate it and I'll just stick it kind of right in there. So I can hold down the Z button, go back to solid view. So I now want to extrude the gutter part out, but I first want to bring it back on the Y-axis so it's right about here, and then I will extrude it out. So we're going to bring that out there, and then I'm going to zoom out here, and I will hit G to grab. Let's bring it over on the Y-axis, and we're going to bring the gutter all the way over to the end. And we will bring it right about there, and you can just end it there, right there before it kind of completely goes into the lighthouse. And then I want to extrude this part in here so that there's actually a place for the water to go in the gutter. So select this really long face here on the top, and you can press the I key to inset the face, and then it's really sensitive, so if you hold down the Shift key, that'll make your movements less sensitive, so I can drag this around, and I'll just stick it there, and then I'll hit E to extrude, and I will bring that down, and I'll bring it back inside there. And then to see this better, I'll go over here to the other side, and I can extrude this back in so that there's actually a hole in the gutter. So I'll extrude this back down, and I'll bring it way down to right about there. So now you can see there's actually a little place there in the gutter for the water to flow through. And then again, I need to select everything with the A key, and I'll recalculate the normals with Shift N. I'll go back to object mode, so that's looking great. Let's press Ctrl S to save the file. So I now want to create the gutter pipe, which is going all the way down to the ground. So I'll press Shift C to center the 3D cursor, and I can press Shift A, and I'm going to add a circle. Now, right after I add the circle, it's right behind me. There's that little add circle setting. You can click on the arrow to open this up. And I want to turn the vertices down to 12 so that there's less geometry because we don't need it to be 32. And then I can close the add circle settings. So I now want to bring this object over on the Y-axis. We'll bring it over here. And then I want to hit the tab key to go into edit mode. And I want to bring the mesh over and bring the mesh up. This way, the origin point is still in the center so that when we add a mirror modifier, it'll mirror it over to the other side of the building. And let's actually do that right now. So I'll click on add modifier, and under generate, we can add a mirror modifier. So I'll now scale the circle down and I'll bring the circle up, and I'm going to bring the circle right over here, scale it down even more, and I'm going to stick it into this edge part of the gutter. Maybe move it over just a little bit, just like that. And I'll bring it into the gutter a bit more and bring it up. So I'll now click here to go to the vertex select, and in the vertex select I can hit E to extrude. We'll bring it down on the Z-axis so I can actually see how big it is. And then I can select everything with the A key, and I can scale it down a bit because it's a little bit too thick. So I'll bring it down and just bring it over like that. So I'll now press the 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and you can see this is actually still a little bit too thick, so I need to select everything and scale it down and just kind of stick it in here. It shouldn't be a very thick pipe, just something like that. So I'll go back to front view, and then I will go into wireframe, and I'll just box select the bottom part here, and I can hit E to extrude, and then R to rotate, and just continue to extrude it and rotate it, and we're going to have it just go along here, and then we'll extrude it all the way down to the side of the house, and then extrude it and rotate it, and extrude it and rotate it, and we're just going to fit it there so it's right next to the side of the house. And I'm going to select everything and scale it down a little bit more just because I think it's a little bit too big. So I can now box select this part, let's bring that down, box select this part and bring that over a little bit. So now if I go back to solid view, you can see what it's doing. So it's going over to the side and then going along the bottom of the house. So let's go back to front view, and I'm gonna hold down the Alt key and select that loop of vertices, and I can extrude this down, and we're gonna bring it all the way down to the very bottom. So it's just gonna go right there into the ground. So just like that. And because we have the mirror modifier over here on the other side, you can see it's doing that as well. So then we'll go back to object mode, and using the object context menu, we'll shade that smooth. Now I do want to add a few metal pieces which are connecting the pipes to the house. So I'll go back into edit mode, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just select that loop of vertices, and I'll duplicate it with Shift D, bring it down on the Z-axis, and I can scale it up a bit so it's a bit bigger, and then I can extrude it down on the Z-axis just like that. And then I'll press the L key with my mouse hovered over that piece to select all of it, and I'll press E to extrude, and then S to scale, and then I'll press Shift Z to bring it down down, but not on the z-axis like that. And then if I go back to object mode, you can see I need to recalculate the normals again. So back in edit mode, I'll select everything and press Shift N to recalculate the normals. All right, back to object mode, and let's shade this smooth here so that's all smooth. And then back in edit mode, I'm just going to select this vertex here, and I'll press the L key to select all of the linked vertices. And I will bring this up on the z-axis till it's a bit higher. And then I want to zoom out here, and I want to make more of them, and I want to make probably about 4 of them. So what I can actually do is just press Shift D to duplicate, bring it down on the z-axis, and place it about there. And because we did that all in one action, we pressed Shift D, then Z, and then bring it down and place it there. We did all of that in one action, so I can now press Shift R. So Shift R is going to repeat the last action, and I'm going to do that a few more times until we have those other pieces there to support the gutter. So press Ctrl S to save the project again, and I want to select this gutter, and I want to make another one over here. So I'll press Shift D to duplicate, bring it over on the y-axis, and stick it just right about there. So there's another gutter on the other side. So I now want to add a little lip, which is kind of popping out here on the foundation of the building. And the bottom part of the building is going to be made out of concrete. So I'll select the building, and let's go into edit mode, and I need to add some loop cuts. So I'll press Ctrl R. We'll first add one loop cut right there. Then I'll press Ctrl R again, click and drag this down, and we'll make the other one about there. So I'm now going to go here to the face select, and I'll hold down the Alt key and select that loop of faces. And I will press E to extrude, and then S to scale. We're going to scale it out so it's thicker, but I'll press Shift Z to exclude the Z axis and scale that up. So now if you need to, you can bring it over here on the x-axis or bring it back and forth on the y-axis. And this part here, I want to be about the same distance. So this part here should be the same thickness as this part here. So I will bring it over like that, go over here to this side, bring it over on the y-axis, and just make it about there. And then this pipe here, the pipe will just go through the concrete. I'm just going to have it go through the concrete like that. Alright, so let's go back to object mode now, and I want to create another smaller part of the house which is coming out, and then there's going to be the door at the front of the house. So what I'm going to do is select the house, and then I'm also going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to select the gutter and also the pipe of the gutter, and then also hold down the Shift key and select the roof. So those 4 objects. So I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and I'm going to bring it forward on the y-axis. And I'll bring it even more forward so it's just out of the way. Then I'll select the house object, and I'll go into edit mode, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and select that loop right there, the loop of faces. I'll hit X to delete and just delete the faces. And then I just want to fill this so that it is flat. So I'll go here to the vertex select, I'll select this vertex and shift select this vertex, and then I can press the F key, and I'll continue to press the F key to fill those faces there. So I now want to bring this part of the house back in. So I'll press 1 for front view, I'll go into wireframe, and I'll just box select this side of the house. And I'll hit G to grab, and I'll bring it back on the x-axis and just bring it in just a little bit, not too far, but just about that far, so just a little bit. Then I'll deselect everything and box select the top here, and I'm going to bring this down as well, so I'll bring it down on the z-axis to about there, and then I'm going to box select all the top part of the house, so basically all of that top part right there, and I'll go back to front view and I'll bring it down so it's quite a bit shorter. And then if I go right back over here to the side, I'll hold down the Z button, go to wireframe, deselect everything. I'm going to box select this side of the house because we actually don't need it. And I can hit X to delete. Let's delete the vertices. And I'll go back to solid view. So I now want to scale down the other objects so that they fit the house. So I'll go back to object mode and I'll select this here and I'll go into edit mode and I'll go to front view and I'll go into wireframe. And I'm going to box select the top part here of the roof and I'll bring it down on the Z axis, place that there. And I can then click and drag to box select this part. And I'll bring that down and I'll stick it right there to match the smaller house. So it's the same size, so just matching that house there. All right, go back to solid view. And then you can see right here, we actually don't need this part of the roof. So what I'm gonna do is go to the face select, I'll select this face, and I'll bring this face back on the y-axis and bring that over there. And now that that has been brought over so it's smaller, we can just delete this part. So I'll go to wireframe and I'll go to the vertex select. I'll click and drag to box select those vertices and then I'll delete those vertices. So back into solid view, you can see the house is smaller. And then I also want to make the gutter smaller because it's much too big. So I'll go to object mode, select the gutter and go to edit mode, and I can go into wireframe and I'm just going to box select that side of the gutter. and I can go back to solid view, and I want to bring it over. So hit G to grab and bring it over on the y-axis and bring it there. So it's just the size that we need it. And then I need to select the entire gutter in edit mode. I need to go to front view, and I'll hit G to grab, and I'm going to bring it way down here, and I'm going to stick it to the other smaller house. Maybe bring it up a little bit, and we'll bring it out a bit and up a little bit more. So just something like that, just fitting that to the house. All right, so now let's go back to object mode. We're going to select the pipe, and we will tab to go to edit mode, and we'll press 1 for the front view. I'll select everything in edit mode. I'll hit G to grab, and I'm going to bring that down there, and I'm just going to fit it to the smaller house. And also here on the side view, bring it over a little bit, and then go to front view and push that in there. So I'll now box select all these objects in object mode, and I'll bring them back on the y-axis, and we're going to stick it right here next to the other house. So just like that. Now if I zoom way in here, you can see that right there are some overlapping faces, so they're flickering a little bit. So I'll hit G to grab, and I'll bring it up on the z-axis just a little bit. So now if I zoom in there, you can see it's not flickering because it's not overlapping. So there we go. Now we have the smaller part of the house, which is connected to the bigger part. So this side of the house is going to have the door with the stairs, but then this side of the house over here is going to have some wood shingles. So let's add those wood shingles now. So I'll press Shift C again to center the 3D cursor, and I can press Shift A, and we're going to add a cube, and I can move the cube over on the y-axis, and I'll press the period on the numpad to zoom into it, and I'll bring it up on the z-axis. So I can now hit the tab key to go into edit mode, and we're going to scale this down much smaller, and then I can also scale it down on the y-axis. We'll make it really small, something like that. Maybe even scale it up on the z-axis a little bit more. And then I want to scale this up on the x-axis, and we want to make it the same length as the house. And you can also bring it over closer to the house to get the size correct. So just scale it up so it's the same size as the house. And then I'll press 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and I'm going to bring it down here, and I'm also going to rotate it slightly over. Actually, before I do that though, I will scale it down on the y-axis a little bit more so it's more thin. Then I'll rotate it over just like that. All right, so I can now duplicate the shingles and I can move it up. So I can actually do this all in one action. So I'll press Shift D to duplicate, then I'll hit Z, bring it up like that, and I'll just bring it up to about there and then place it there. So because I did all of that in one action, I can now press Shift R, and Shift R will repeat the last action. So I can just continue to press Shift R, and you can actually hold down the Shift and R and just bring it all the way up until it goes up to the very top. I'm just going to continue to do this until it's at the very top. So just like that. Actually, that last one there, I want to delete it because it's too high up. All right, so that's looking good. So now we have this extra part here and over here that we want to delete. So I'll press 1 on the numpad to go to front view. I'll hold down the Z button and go to wireframe. And I actually want to use the knife tool to cut away the extra part of the mesh. So I'll hit the K for the knife tool. So you can see now the mouse is that little knife icon. And then if I move my mouse right down here where the text is and scroll over, I can hit the C button. So the C button, you can see right here, it says cut through. It is kind of small text, so it might be hard for you to see, but it says cut through off, and if you press the C button, that's going to turn the cut through on. So make sure it says cut through on. So now that it's turned on, by hitting the C button, I can cut through the mesh and it'll go all the way through the rest of the mesh. It won't just go through the front face. So I'm going to click right here, and then I can drag up, and then I can click right here, bring it over, click right there, and then I can bring it down, click right there, and then I'll hit enter. So now it's going to cut through all of those vertices. So I can deselect everything and then just hit B for the box select. I can just box select those faces there, actually those vertices, and then right over here hit B for the box select, just box select those vertices there. So just those two sides are selected, but not these ones down here. So I'll now just delete that, so we're going to delete the vertices. And now just go along here and make sure that you can't see any of those shingles where you don't want them. All right, so that is looking really good. If I just move this over real quick just to show you what we've done, we basically just cut the edges of those shingles, so now it is flat there. All right, so there we go. We now have those cool shingles on the side of the house. And then let's add a bevel to this as well. So I'll click on the shingles. Let's click on add modifier, and I can add the bevel modifier. And on the segments here, I'll just turn this to 2. And then on this amount here, I'll just make it very small. So it'll just add a tiny bit of a bevel there on the edges of the wood. And then using the object context menu, we can shade that smooth. So now we have a cool detail on the side of the house. Alright, so I now want to cut out the door, and then we're going to create the door frame and the door. So I'll select this object here. Now if I go into edit mode, you can see this object has a mirror modifier, but I don't want a door on this side, I just want it on the front. So here on the mirror modifier, I need to go back to object mode, and then I will click here on the drop down arrow on the mirror, and I'll just click on apply. So now if I go back to edit mode, both sides are geometry. So what I'm now going to do is hold down the Alt key and just select that loop of vertices there, and I can hit G to grab. I'll hit Z, bring it up on the Z axis, and bring it up about that far. Then I can hold down the Alt key, just select that loop of vertices there, and I actually want to scale it flat, so I'll hit S to scale. I'll scale it on the Y axis, and then I can type 0 and enter, just so that that is perfectly flat, and then I'll bring it over on the Z axis. And we're going to bring it over a bit farther to about there. And then I want to hold down the Alt key and select that loop of vertices there. I'll scale this. Let's scale it on the Y axis. And I'll type in 0 and then enter. And then I'll bring it over on the Y axis again. This one is going to be over to about there. So these faces here, that is where the door is going to be. So let's go to the face select, and I can hold down the shift key and select these faces, and then I can hit E to extrude. We're going to extrude that back in there. So that's where the door will be, and I'll hit X to delete, and we can delete the faces. Now that door is actually a little bit too wide, so I want to make it a bit less wide. So let's go to the side view. So hit the 3 on the numpad for side view. I'll click right up here to go to the vertex select, and I'll go into wireframe. And I'm just going to box select those vertices there, and I'll bring it back in a little bit. I can click and drag to box select those vertices and bring that in a little bit. And that is a bit better, so I don't want the door quite that wide. Alright, so let's now create the door frame. So what I'll do is go here to the face select, and I'm just going to select this face here. I'll press Shift D to duplicate it and bring that out, and then I can scale it down on the X-axis, bring that down so it's a bit thinner, because I don't want the door frame to be super thick. And then I will scale it up on the Z-axis a bit. And then I can bring it back a little bit on the Y-axis. Then I can extrude that out, and we'll extrude this over there just to bring that out to make it thicker. And then I can select this face here. Let's bring it down on the Z-axis to about there. And then I can extrude that up. And why I'm extruding that up is so that I have another face here. So I'll select this face, and I will extrude this face out. We'll bring that all the way over, and then I can extrude this again. We'll bring that out there, and I want it to be about the same size. So the length of this part right here will be the same there. And then I can select this face, and I'll extrude it down. We're going to extrude it down there into that little part right there, which is where the concrete's going to be. So now we have a nice door frame, and I do want the door frame to be a separate object, so you can just hover your mouse over this piece. You can press the L key to select the linked vertices. So with that piece selected, I'll press the P key, and I'm going to separate by selection. So now it's its own object. So now let's create the door. So I'll press Shift C to center the 3D cursor, and then I'll press Shift A, and I can add a plane. Let's bring the plane over here, and then I'll zoom into it with the period on the numpad, and I'll bring this plane here, and I'm going to stick it right here in the door. And then I'll tab to go into object mode, and I'll rotate the door on the Y-axis by 90 degrees and hit enter. And I can scale the door up on the Z-axis and bring it up on the Z-axis just to fill the door frame, and I can bring it back a little bit. So something like that. Now I'm going to be adding some details to the door, so I want to add a mirror modifier so that the door is symmetrical on each side. So I'll press Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and I will left click and then right click so it stays in the center. And if I go to the face select, I just want to select this face here, and I'm just going to delete those faces, so just delete that face. And then because the origin point was in the very center of the plane, I can click on add modifier, and under generate I can add the mirror modifier. Right here you can see it's being mirrored on this side, but I actually want to turn off the X, and I want to turn on the Y instead, so it's mirroring it over to the other side. And then also we can turn on the clipping button right there, and that way it'll merge the center. So now if we do something over to this side, it'll mirror it over to the other side. So now let's add the details to the door. So I'm going to press Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and I'll scroll my mouse wheel until there are 2, and then I'll left click and right click so it's in the center there. And I'll bring this back a little bit so it's a bit closer, and I can scale it up on the Y-axis. Then I'm going to press Ctrl R to add another loop cut here, and this one's going to be going back and forth. So I'll drag this one up, and I'll stick this one about there. Then I can press Ctrl R again, and this one's going to be right up here. So we're basically making a square there. And then I want to have 2 longer squares. So I'll press Ctrl R to add another loop cut, Let's bring that there. Control R to add another loop cut, and this one's going to be pretty low. And then I want to add 2 more loop cuts in the center, so Control R again. We're going to add one a little bit higher like that, and then Control R to add another one. And let's put that one there. All right, so let's go here to the face select. And so we now have this one here, we have this one here, and then this one here. So you can select all of those faces. And we're going to use this to make a cool detail on the front of the door. So I'm going to hit E to extrude. We're going to extrude this back. Then I'll hit S to scale. And you can see when I'm scaling it, it's scaling them all together, but I instead want to scale each face by its center. So to do this, we can go right here to the transform pivot point, and I'm going to choose individual origins. So this way, each face will be scaled individually. So I'll scale that down. Then I can hit E to extrude and then S to scale. We're going to scale another one inside that face, and then I can extrude this out, and then I'll scale that down a little bit. So you can see that cool detail that we're adding to the door there. And also these 2 faces here, if I select both of them, I'm going to scale them up a little bit on the Z axis. So it's not being stretched quite as much going up and down. All right, that is it. So that is pretty good. So then if you want to, you can move this by selecting everything and hitting G to grab, and you can scale it if you want to, maybe bring it closer. And I could also scale it up bigger. All right, so that is pretty good. I do want to scale it down a little bit so it's not quite as thick. So I'll scale it down. Let's scale it on the X-axis and make it just a little bit less thick. All right, go back to object mode. And then I also want to add a bevel to the edges. So let's click on add modifier, and I can add a bevel. And right here on the bevel, we will turn the segments up to like a 3. And then this amount here, I can just turn that down a bit so it's very small. And then using the object context menu, I can just shade that smooth. So there we go. If I zoom out, you can see we have a nice little door there on the lighthouse. Let's press Control S to save the project. All right, so we're now going to be adding the stairs. So I'll press Shift A. Let's go here to Mesh, and I'm going to be adding a cube. Let's bring the cube over here. We're going to bring the cube right underneath the doorway, and I'll scale the cube down a bit and bring it over. And since I've scaled it down, I want to press Control A and apply the scale so it's now the object's new default size. And I'm doing that because when we add the procedural material, the size of the texture is going to change depending on the size of the object. So I just want to make sure I apply the scale. So now I will hit the tab key to go into edit mode, and in edit mode we can just scale the mesh, so the mesh will be scaled but the actual object won't be scaled. So I'll scale it down a bit and I'll bring it up a bit, and I'm going to stick it right there, and then I can bring it over to the center of the door, and I'm also going to scale it up on the y-axis, and I'll bring it out to about there. Then I'll go here to the bottom face right there, and I'll hit E to extrude, I'll bring that down, and then E to extrude again, and I'll bring that down. So now I can select these 2 faces, and I'll extrude them out, place that there, select this one, E to extrude, and we'll put that one there. So now I can go back to object mode, and then I want to add a bevel to round the edges, so I'll click here on add modifier on the modifier properties, and under generate I can add a bevel modifier, and I'll turn the segments up to like a 4, and then I can also turn the amount way down, and then using the object context menu, I'll shade the object smooth. All right, so that is looking pretty good. I might select this and just bring it down just slightly. So I now want to add another object for the railing. So I'll press Shift A, and I'll add another cube. Let's bring this cube over, and I want to stick this cube about in the very center of the doorway because we're going to be adding a mirror modifier. So I'll hit the tab key to go into edit mode. Let's bring this over here, and we're going to scale it way down, and I'll bring it forward. And I now want to add a mirror modifier to mirror it over to the other side. So I'll click on add modifier, and I can add the mirror modifier. So under generate, add the mirror modifier, and then it looks like I need to use the y-axis because the x-axis is going the opposite direction, so choose the y there to mirror it. So I'll now scale this down really small, and I'm going to stick it right in here, and I don't want to stick it in the door frame. I'm going to stick it right there on the side of the house. And then real quick, I need to go back to object mode, and I need to select the stairs and go into edit mode, and I need to select everything, and I'm going to scale the stairs on the x-axis, actually the y-axis. I'll scale them on the y-axis just so that they're a bit longer so that the railing can go down into the stairs. So that is good. So I'll go back to object mode, and I'll just select the railing again, and I'll go back to edit mode, and I can select this face here, hit G to grab, and bring it over on the x-axis like that. And then I can press the 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I'll hit E to extrude, bring that out. Then I can select this face right here, E to extrude, and I can bring this all the way down just like that. And I think I want to select everything and just scale it down a little bit because it is a little bit big. So I'm just going to make everything a little bit smaller. And also, if you select that face right there, we need to bring that face there back into the house. Alright, so I'm now going to select this face here, and I'll press 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I'll hit E to extrude, and I'll bring this way over, and I'll hit G to grab, and I can bring it down on the Z-axis so it goes down with the stairs. And then I'll hit E to extrude again, and I'll bring this one down as well, and I actually want to bring it down a little bit farther so that the end of the railing goes into the ground. So I can now press Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and I can left click, drag over, and then left click again, so there's another loop there. So I now want to select that bottom face, so I'll click on the face select mode, I'll select that face, and I can hit E to extrude, but then I want to hit the Z key, and I want to hit the Z key twice, so we're bringing it down on the Z axis, and I'll just bring it down there into the ground, and if you want to flatten that, you can scale it. You can scale it on the Z axis, and then type 0 and enter to kind of flatten that. So that's pretty cool, but I do want to add some more loop cuts and make another railing under the top one. So I'll press Ctrl R to add a loop cut. Let's bring this up here. I can press 1 on the numpad to go to top view, bring that up there. Ctrl R to add another loop cut. Let's bring that there. And then right up here, I'll add some loop cuts here. So we'll put one there, Ctrl R, and we'll add another one there. So now I can navigate right over here, and I can go to the face select. I'll just select that face, and I'll hit E to extrude and just extrude that back. And then right here, I want to select that face, and I'll press X and delete faces, and also select that one and hit X and delete faces. So I now want to add some faces around there in those two openings. So I'll go to the vertex select, and I'm going to hold down the shift key and select these 4 vertices, and then I'm going to go here and shift select these 4 vertices. So now that both of those vertices are selected, I'm going to press F3. F3 is going to go to the search, and I'm going to start to search for bridge edge loops. So another way you can do this is just by pressing Ctrl E, and then you can grab the bridge edge loops. So it's right here, the third one, bridge edge loops. So when I click on this, you can see now it's going to fill it. So now I can go back to object mode, and you can see there is another railing there. And then I think I want to select the railing again and go back into edit mode, and I'll go to wireframe, and I'm just going to box select that part right there, and I'm going to bring it out and also bring it up a bit. So if I go back to solid view, that's a little bit better. I just want it to be a little bit farther out and a little bit higher up. And then also I'll select these 2 vertices here and bring them up a little bit just to kind of flatten that part on the top. Alright, so let's now create the door handle. So I'll press Shift A, I'll go here to mesh, and I'm going to add a circle, and then let's zoom out here, and I'm going to bring the circle way over here, bring it over, and I can scale it way down, and we're just going to scale it way down here and stick it right in there, and we'll just scale that really small, and then I can press Ctrl A and just apply the scale. So let's tab to go into edit mode, and I want to rotate this, and we'll rotate it on the y-axis, and I'll just type 90 and enter, and then we can scale this down a bit more, and I want to bring it right there kind of into the door, and I'll actually bring it down a little bit more. And then I can hit E to extrude. Let's extrude it out on the x-axis. We'll just bring it out about that far, and then I can hit E and then S. We will bring that way down and then extrude it out again. So E, bring it out on the x-axis, just like that. And then I can select everything with the A key, Shift N to recalculate the normals. And then back into edit mode, I want to hold down the Alt key, select that loop right there. I'll press Shift D to duplicate it and bring it up on the Z axis. And this one I can scale down a little bit more. And I'll press the F key to fill a face there. And then I can hit E to extrude. We'll extrude that in and then scale it up. So this is going to be like the door handle, and then this is going to be like that other secondary lock. So I'll scale that down a little bit more, maybe select both of them and bring them down just a little bit more, something like that. Maybe scale them down a little bit because we are going for a realistic render, not really a stylized render. I think I might even bring this one up a little bit and bring it back in a bit. And then let's add a bevel to this. So I'll click on add modifier. I can add the bevel, and I will turn the amount way down so it's very small, and I'll just turn the segments up to like a 3. And then if I go back to object mode, I can use the object context menu and shade the object smooth. Now, if you look over here, there are some spots like right here where there still is a bevel, and that is because of the limit method. So it's only going to add a bevel to the angles which are over this amount. So I want to turn this angle up. You can see if it's turned really far down all the way to 0, it's adding a bevel to every single angle, but I want to turn this up a little bit past 30 so that it's going to be smooth right here, but then there's going to be a bevel on this here, because like this here, this is a 90-degree edge. Now I also need to go back into edit mode, and I need to add the handle. So I'll press Shift A, we can add a cube. I can zoom out here, bring the cube over and bring the cube up, and I'll just scale the cube way down and we'll stick it right here in the door handle. All right, bring it really close, scale it down even more. We're just gonna stick it right there in the door handle. So something like that. I can go right here to the face select. I'm going to select this face and I'll bring the face in because it is kind of long. And then this face here, I'll bring it out a bit. And then also this here, I want to bring that down. And this face here, bring it down a little bit so it's smaller. I can also select this face and I can bring the face out a bit. And then I can extrude this face. I'll scale it down a bit. And if I press 7 on the numpad to go to top view, I can hold down the Z button and go into wireframe. And I can rotate this and then extrude it, scale it down a bit, rotate it, and extrude it. Scale it down a little bit more. So we're just kind of rotating the end of that handle and making it smaller. So now you can see what we've done there. So we're just rotating that handle and making it smaller. So if I go back to solid view, you can see what I've done there. So now it just looks a little bit smaller. And I actually don't really like it getting smaller as it goes in. So I'm just gonna hold down the shift key and select all of these faces here. And I wanna flatten them so I can scale them. And let's scale them on the Z axis. And I'll type in 0 and enter, just to kind of flatten that. And then I can do the same here. So select those faces and I'll scale them on the Z axis by 0 and hit enter. That's a little bit better. And then back to in object mode, I can shade this smooth with the object context menu. So there we go. We now have that little door handle. All right. So we are almost done with the modeling of the lighthouse and we're almost done with this part. But the last thing that I want to do is add these windows right here, right up here. So I want to add another window right there. So let's select the tower and I'll hit the tab key to go into edit mode. And I want to add some loop cuts for where I want the window to be. So I'll press Ctrl R to add a loop cut, click and drag up and place it about there. Then Ctrl R to add another loop cut and place this one about there. So this is where I want the window to be. So I want to add some more loop cuts. So I'll press Ctrl R and I want to add 2 loop cuts here. So make sure you are on the very side of the lighthouse. So right here, I'm going to press Ctrl R to add another loop cut and I'm going to scroll out my mouse wheel and then left click and right click so it stays in the center. And then Ctrl R to add another loop cut, scroll my mouse wheel and left click and right click so it stays in the center. So now what I can do is just select the faces that I don't want and delete them. So I'll click here on the face select and I'm going to hold down the shift key and select these 4 faces. Now I want to extrude them back before I delete them, so I'll hit E to extrude, bring that back there, and then I can hit X to delete, and I'll just delete the faces. So that's where the window is going to be, and we might need to adjust the size later when we bring the window over. But let's go right over here, and I'm actually going to click on the edge select, and then I can select this edge, and hit G to grab, bring it up on the Z axis. Then I can select these 2 edges, hit G to grab, bring those up on the Z axis, just like that, so that the top of the window is just a little bit fancy and it kind of has that curved shape. All right, so that is pretty good. All right, so I'll go back to object mode and I'm going to select the window and also select the glass and I'll press Shift D to duplicate this and I'll bring this up here and I'm going to stick it right there in the window. So I'll bring this up here. And then if you need to change the size of the window or change the size of the window frame, the hole where the window is, you can do that. So I'm just going to bring that back a little bit, something like that. And then on these objects here, we need to delete the mirror modifier because you can see there's another mirror over there. So let's click on the glass here and hit the X button to delete the mirror. And if I click on the window frame, I can scroll down here and here on the mirror, hit the X button to get rid of that. Now you can see there is a bit too much extra space here. So I'm going to go into edit mode with the tab key and I'll click right here to go to the vertex select. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just select that loop of vertices. And then I can hold down the Shift key and I'm going to shift and select all of those vertices right there. And also that one there. So I can now double tap the G key and double tapping the G key will activate the edge slide and I'm going to slide all of these loops right up there until they're inside there. Now you can see those loops didn't move, but that's easy to fix. I can go here to the face select and I can shift select these 2 faces. I'll hit G to grab and I can bring them up on the Z axis and just push that up there. So now I can go back to object mode and there is the window there. All right, so I'll zoom out here and I'm going to press Ctrl S to save the project. And this is going to wrap it up for part 2 of the tutorial series. So the lighthouse modeling is finished. So I hope you're enjoying the tutorial series so far and thank you for watching. And I'm going to be uploading 1 part each day of the tutorial series on my YouTube channel. So when the next part is released, it'll be right there on the end screen and also the link will be in the description. And if you're enjoying this tutorial series and you'd like to help support me and this channel, then some great ways to do that are by checking out my Gumroad store and my Patreon page and the YouTube memberships. All the links will be in the description. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next part 3.